Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like up, with Sharon and her lawyer set on pressuring the authorities to reopen Heather's murder case. Ian and Jordan have a real problem on their hands. How will Young and Restless intervene so as to give the villains more time to rain terror down on Geno City? Well, we're already seeing clues on screen, and it involves someone else being targeted by the gruesome twosome. After Sharon's revealing second hypnosis session, she's convinced someone else was in the apartment with her and Heather. And though she didn't see Jordan's face, she remembered a gloved hand being placed on her shoulder and guiding her down to the sofa. She also remembered that at that point, Heather was alive and well and screaming from across the room. Sharon basically witnessed Heather's murder at the hands of Jordan, but it's buried deep. Not only was she blacking out and traumatized, but she was under the effects of the PCP that Jordan had been lacing her meds with all along. When it first came to light that Sharon's prescription had been tainted, there was a lot of speculation about who could possibly hate her enough to do such a terrible thing. Gadding about town with her hatred of the blonde on full display was her former nemesis, none other than Daniel's furious mother, which seemed to be hinting that Sharon and company might turn their suspicions on her at some point. Of course, we all know that Jordan is the real culprit. That's why we speculated that Jordan would frame Phyllis, as it certainly wouldn't be a stretch to believe Red would go these lengths. As we, and everyone in Genoa City knows, she literally faked her own death in an effort to rid herself of Diane. Fast forward to Michael and Lauren telling Phyllis that after confessing, Sharon is now changing her story and believes a third person was in the apartment and killed Heather. This new information, along with the idea that the investigation would be reopened, thus causing Daniel and Lucy more pain, didn't sit well with the rampaging redhead who adopted a new mantra. Over at Sharon's place during a confrontation, and over at Daniel's place, whilst updating her son on the latest, Phyllis declared that Sharon will pay no matter what happens. She'll pay one way or another, etc. With this, Young and Restless is setting the scene for Phyllis to be framed for lacing Sharon's meds with PCP and killing Heather to set her up for a murder rap. Indeed, she's in line to be Jordan and Ian's next target/victim, as she's the perfect suspect to take the heat off of them. All they'd have to do is plant Jordan's gloves and a little container of PCP in her bag or car. And Bob's your uncle, as they say. Going a step further, since Ian wants Sharon gone, they'll probably try to kill her and frame Phyllis for that as well. As we already previewed, Sharon's life is in grave danger, and recent casting tells us there will be more bloodshed very soon. What a nightmare for both of Nick's ex-wives. He'll be stuck in the middle, as will Michael, who won't be able to help Phyllis because he's already been retained by Sharon, Ian and Jordan. Meanwhile, we'll be delighted by how easy it is to incriminate Phyllis and make her pay for their dirty work. Mark our words, this whole mess is about to become a full-on disaster zone. The murder of Sharon Walker, an intelligent and popular woman, left the small town of Brooksville in a state of shock. She was known for her work as a community organizer, and her tragic death shook the lives of everyone who knew her. The investigation seemed to stall, with the police unable to find substantial leads that pointed to a clear culprit. That is until Ian and Jordan, two brothers with a history of conflict and a dangerous capacity for manipulation, decided to orchestrate a devious plot that would entrap an innocent woman. Their target, Phyllis Gray, a neighbor of Sharon's, whom they believed could be a convenient scapegoat. The plan was elaborate, clever, and chilling. It was a web of deceit that would not only fool the authorities, but also deceive those closest to Sharon, ensuring that Phyllis would be the last person anyone would suspect. To understand how this unthinkable plot unfolded, one must first examine the characters involved. Ian and Jordan. Ian and Jordan Frame were not always the criminals they were eventually known to be. Growing up, they had been close. Two peas in a pod, bound by a shared sense of frustration at their circumstances. Their father, a disillusioned factory worker, had never been present in their lives, and their mother, struggling to raise them on her own, had little time or energy for their emotional needs. The lack of guidance and nurturing led to a relationship that was built on mutual support, but it was a support that festered in secrecy and darkness. Over the years, their bond evolved into something far more sinister. Ian, the older of the two, had always been the mastermind. He was intelligent, manipulative, and strategic, traits that made him dangerous. Jordan, on the other hand, was impulsive and emotional, Though he lacked his brother's intellectual gifts, he was easily influenced and willing to do whatever it took to gain his brother's approval. The brothers had committed petty crimes in the past, petty thefts and con games, but they were always careful not to leave a trail. However, as their ambition grew, so did the scale of their plans. They realized that they could manipulate people on a far larger scale, maybe even influence the course of justice itself. And Sharon Walker's murder provided the perfect opportunity. At first glance, Ian and Jordan had no direct reason to harm Sharon Walker. She had never crossed them, and she wasn't involved in any of their criminal dealings. But Sharon had something that the brothers lacked: respectability and status. Sharon was an admired figure in the town, and her social standing and network of friends made her the type of person who would always stand in contrast to the Frame brothers' reputation. The idea began to take root when Ian realized that Sharon's death could serve as a means of deflecting suspicion from their criminal activities. The brothers had been involved in a number of small, but increasingly brazen scams, and the heat was beginning to close in on them. What better way to escape detection than to redirect all the town's attention to someone else, preferably someone who had no way of defending herself? Phyllis Gray, a quiet and somewhat reclusive woman who lived down the street from Sharon, seemed like the ideal candidate. Phyllis had been friendly with Sharon in the past, but their relationship had cooled in recent months after a falling out that nobody fully understood. Phyllis was known to have been upset by Sharon's involvement in certain community issues, and in a small town where gossip ran rampant, it wasn't hard for Ian and Jordan to manipulate the narrative. The first step in their plan was simple but crucial. They needed to establish a plausible connection between Phyllis and Sharon's murder. Ian and Jordan knew that Phyllis had been at Sharon's house the evening before her death. It wasn't uncommon for the two women to have dinner together or discuss community matters. What if they could plant evidence that made it appear as if Phyllis had been there on the night of the murder, perhaps even that she had been fighting with Sharon? Jordan had a talent for finding incriminating objects in unexpected places. One evening, while Phyllis was at the local grocery store, Ian and Jordan broke into her house and planted a piece of Sharon's jewelry that had been taken from the crime scene. They were careful to make sure it was hidden just well enough for Phyllis to accidentally find it later, but obvious enough that it would be hard to deny its significance. In addition to the jewelry, they carefully staged a series of phone calls, sending messages from Phyllis's phone to Sharon's, creating a false timeline that made it seem as if Phyllis had been attempting to reach Sharon after the murder occurred. The messages were not threatening, but they hinted at an emotional confrontation, a quarrel between friends gone wrong. Ian then began spreading rumors to key witnesses in the neighborhood, all designed to paint Phyllis as unstable and bitter. He made sure that people remembered Phyllis' recent outbursts over Sharon's involvement in the community, outbursts that had once been written off as the behavior of a troubled woman. But now, through Ian's subtle manipulation, those same outbursts seemed far more dangerous and menacing. The trap was set. Phyllis had no idea that her life was about to unravel. She went about her daily routines, unaware that her every move had been carefully scrutinized. When the police arrived at her door to question her about Sharon's murder, Phyllis was confused and frightened. She didn't know why they were there, and her discomfort only worked in the brothers' favor. The evidence that had been planted, along with the rumors Ian had carefully nurtured, was more than enough to have her arrested on suspicion of Sharon's murder. The town was stunned. No one could believe that Phyllis, the quiet, misunderstood woman, could have committed such a brutal crime. But Ian and Jordan had done their work so thoroughly that even the most skeptical townspeople began to question Phyllis's involvement. The pieces seemed to fit together too perfectly for it to be a coincidence. But as with all well-laid plans, cracks began to show. Phyllis, while initially overwhelmed by the accusations, maintained her innocence. She steadfastly denied any involvement in Sharon's death. As the investigation continued, key pieces of evidence began to emerge that pointed to inconsistencies in the case against her. The police, realizing they might have been too quick to judge, re-examined the evidence. Eventually, the truth came to light. Surveillance footage from a nearby store showed Ian and Jordan at the scene on the night of the murder, far too close to Sharon's house to be mere bystanders. The planted jewelry and manipulated messages were traced back to them. As the evidence mounted, the brothers' web of lies was exposed, and they were arrested for Sharon's murder. In the end, the Frame brothers' elaborate plot to frame Phyllis Gray had failed. Their criminal minds had overestimated their ability to manipulate the truth, and the pursuit of justice led to their undoing. Phyllis, though traumatized by the ordeal, was exonerated, and the town of Brooksville slowly returned to normal, though the scars left by Sharon's death and the brothers' treachery would remain for a long time.